We recently spent a couple of days in Copenhagen, Denmark at the grand départ of the 2022 Tour de France, hassling team mechanics for access to the latest and greatest pro bikes. As the sport evolves, so do the bikes, and there are always some interesting trends to bikes at the Tour if you look carefully. With that in mind, here are our top 5 trends that we spotted at the 2022 Tour de France. But before I go any further, why not subscribe to our wonderful channel if you haven't already? If you've seen our previous videos on the top 5 new bikes spotted at the Tour de France, you'll know that pro bikes might be getting more aerodynamic with every generation, but they don't seem to be getting much lighter. Of course, if you haven't seen that video, then finish this first before watching that one from the link in the description below. Back to tech trends though, and while we were not allowed to weigh every bike we saw at this year's race, the ones that we did all weighed around 7.6 to 8.3 kilos. For those who aren't aware of the intricacies of cycling's complicated technical regulations, that's around a kilogram heavier than the UCI's minimum bike weight limit of 6.8 kilos. That's right. Many of the pros at the Tour de France this year are riding bikes that could be 2 full water bottles lighter according to the rules. How can the bikes being raced at the pinnacle of the sport be so heavy when manufacturers are endlessly claiming their latest and greatest bikes are the lightest they've ever been? The answer is, as you might expect, complicated. Manufacturers usually aren't lying when they tell us their new bikes are lighter than the previous models. They may, however, be creative with the truth. Claimed weights for new bikes are typically taken with the bike's lightest possible setup, often with lightweight paint jobs and lightweight finishing kit, and without pedals, bottle cages, computer mounts, or any other accessories. The bikes we weighed at the Tour mostly had team issue paint jobs designed to attract attention and look nice in pictures. They also had pedals and everything else you need to actually ride in the real world. And they were all optimised for the flat opening stages in Denmark too. That meant practically everyone was on a dedicated Aero road bike with deeper, heavier rims, bigger chainrings than normal. Even the diminutive sprinter Caleb Ewan of Team Lotto Soudal was using 62mm deep rims on his Ridley Noah Fast. Many pro riders will also forgo the latest and lightest and most expensive kit in favour of kit they simply prefer. Now that could mean an older, heavier saddle, as we saw in Jasper Stuyven's new Trek Madone SLR, or a set of non-stock handlebars that adds weight to the bike compared to a stock build. Lastly, it is undoubtedly true that the move to hydraulic road disc brakes has contributed to this peloton-wide increase in bike weight. Now we can argue until the cows come home whether this change has made road bikes faster or not, but the pro peloton has made its bed, or had it made for them, and now it has to sleep in it. As the peloton gets faster and faster, the focus on improving rider aerodynamics intensifies with each passing year. Obviously, there were brand new Aero road bikes such as the latest Trek Madone SLR and Scott Foil RC. Beyond that though, many riders and teams went even further in the search of aerodynamic efficiency. 42cm wide bars used to be the de facto standard in the pro peloton, but we saw most riders on narrower handlebars at this year's Tour. In fact, we only measured one handlebar wider than 40cm during our time in Copenhagen, a 42cm wide handlebar on Chris Juul Jensen's new Giant Propel Advanced SL. At the other end of the spectrum was Taco van der Hoorn's Cube Lightning C68X TE. While van der Hoorn's handlebars measured around 38cm at the drops, the shifter hoods were aggressively turned inwards to offer an effective bar width of just 33cm. With the Tour's opening stage being a pan-flat time trial, teams looking to be in the mix also turned up with some interesting aero tricks. World time trial champion Filippo Ganna and a few of his Ineos Grenadiers teammates used a new Pinarello Bolide F time trial bike complete with prototype wheels from Princeton Carbon Works. The Team Ineos Grenadiers riders also had some wacky visors with strange plastic edging and some unusually large helmets as well. While we don't know for certain, our best guess is that these tricks are intended to help divert the airflow around the rider's shoulders and reduce their aerodynamic drag, a bit like the infamous Pot Tempo. Specialized provided its new S-Works TT5 helmet to its sponsored pro teams as well, which seems to be designed with similar principles in mind. though not every rider, including stage winner Yves Lampaert, chose to wear it on the day. The Tour may be the sport's biggest shop window, but even cycling's biggest brands are still suffering from a lack of stock to display in it. While most sponsored teams had the latest Dura-Ace Di2 R9200 group sets on their road bikes, even the biggest teams can't get hold of them for their time trial bikes, it seems. Back-to-back world champion Filippo Ganna had to make do with 11-speed Dura-Ace Di2 R9100 on his time trial bike. The new Dura-Ace R9200 power meters were also in short supply, with many riders, including former Tour winner Geraint Thomas, still using the old Dura-Ace R9100 power meter cranksets instead. Now, officially, the 11-speed chainrings on the old cranksets aren't compatible with the new 12-speed chains, and anecdotally, some teams have said they have experienced more chain drops in race situations when using the two together. Possibly as a result, we saw a few teams using chain catchers for a little bit of extra security and peace of mind. Perhaps indicating just how bad the situation is, Lotto Soudal were even using Campagnolo Super Record EPS group sets from last season on their Ridley Dean time trial bikes. Though the Belgian team lists Shimano as a partner on its website, indicating the Japanese brand is a sponsor of the team, it appears that even the world's largest manufacturer of bicycle components can't supply a World Tour team with enough components. Team Bike Exchange Jayco told us it also had to borrow 12-speed Dura-Ace parts from its women's squad to outfit the men's bike for the Tour. So, the next time you can't get hold of those brake pads you need, you can at least take comfort in the knowledge that the world's best riders are having exactly the same problems. As we've commented before, the trend towards tubeless tyres and wheel systems only continues to gather pace. Some teams, such as Team Ineos Grenadiers and Intermarché Wanty-Gobert, appear to have made a complete switch to tubeless setups, using the Continental GP5000 STR for road stages and a new TT version of the tyre for the opening time trial. Of course, it remains to be seen whether that continues to be the case once the Tour moves into the mountains, but previous races in mountainous terrain this year have seen the teams stick to the tubeless formula so far. Mirroring wider trends across the road cycling industry, tyre sizes in the pro peloton are also continuing to grow. We're seeing more riders on 700x28C tyres, even for stages on good quality tarmac roads. Jasper Stuyven, for example, had 28C Pirelli P0 Race TLR tyres on his Trek Madone SLR. One tyre brand, who didn't want to be named for fear of giving away team secrets, also told us that some riders were using 28C tyres for time trials as well, depending on the race circumstances. Things have come a long way since the days when 28C tyres were the reserve of cobbled classics only. Despite all this, there are still a good number of teams and riders using tubular tyres though. Team Jumbo-Visma, EF Education EasyPost, Team DSM and Team Bike Exchange Jayco, for example, all had a mix of tubeless and tubular Vittoria Corsa tyres on their bikes. Dr. Kieran O'Grady, a performance engineer at Israel Premier Tech, told us the team's riders would use a mix of clinchers, tubeless and tubular tyres throughout the race, depending on rider choice and the terrain of each stage. We were also told that Israel Premier Tech Domestiques would use tubeless tyre inserts as a bit of extra insurance. In contrast, the head mechanic at Intermarché Wanty-Gobert, Mikey van Kruinen again, told us that his team had tried tubeless inserts but had abandoned them. And Mikey, I'm very sorry if I mangled your name. As well as being a hassle to fit and remove, the foam inserts apparently have a tendency to soak up some of the tubeless sealant, meaning you need to add more than normal. Now, for weight-obsessed pros who are, as already discussed, riding relatively heavy bikes these days, that is a deal breaker. It's likely this continuing obsession with weight is partly behind the reluctance of many pros to make the switch from tubular to tubeless as well, despite the potential gains in rolling resistance and puncture protection on offer. Road bike gearing for punters might be getting smaller, but the opposite is true for the pros. During our time in Copenhagen, we didn't see any big chainrings with fewer than 54 teeth, and many riders were going even bigger, especially on their time trial bikes. We saw plenty of 58 tooth chainrings, but the biggest we saw in person were the monster 60 tooth won by dinner plates we saw on Jakob Fuglsang's Factor Hanzo and Mads Pedersen's Trek Speed concept. FSA, however, said its sponsored professional teams would be using its new 64 tooth won by carbon fibre chainring at the opening time trial, although we didn't manage to actually confirm that for ourselves. Of course, not every rider using a monster big ring will have spent all of their time mashing around in the biggest gear available. Much of the trend towards bigger chainrings is driven by the pursuit of improved drivetrain efficiency. It's well established that larger chainrings and cassette cogs can offer a measurable reduction in the amount of power lost to drivetrain friction. Those using such monster front chainrings would likely have spent a significant amount of time in a slightly larger rear sprocket with an improved chainline as a result. Removing the front derailleur is also said to confer a small aerodynamic benefit as well, so it was no surprise to see plenty of riders ditching it for the pan-flat opening time trial. The marginal gains are one thing, but using massive chainrings also points to the fact that the speeds in the pro peloton are getting pretty ridiculous. Likely thanks to the mass adoption of smarter training techniques, power meters, and aerodynamic equipment. The 2022 edition of Paris-Roubaix, for example, was the fastest ever, with race winner Dylan van Baarle of Team Ineos Grenadiers averaging an absurd 45.79 km per hour across the 257 kilometre race. Those heavy bikes don't seem to be holding too many pros back then. Those are our top 5 trends that we spotted at this year's Tour de France, but I'm sure there are plenty more, so don't forget to leave yours in the comments below. And if you want to see more hot Tour de France tech, then check out this video.